What if your child's existence threatened everything you'd built? What would you sacrifice for fame? In Hollywood's golden age, stars paid a devastating price: their own children. For decades, icons like Judy Garland and Rita Hworth were forced to abandon, hide, or even deny their children to protect their careers. Studio moguls wielded morality clauses like weapons, coercing abortions, orchestrating fake adoptions, and exiling infants to shadowy institutions. Tonight, we expose the heartbreaking truth of 19 beloved celebrities forced to deny their own flesh and blood. From staged adoptions to secret exile, these are the painful stories Hollywood tried desperately to bury forever. Judy Garland's. In 1941, as Judy Garland's star was ascending at MGM following the triumph of The Wizard of Oz, the 19-year-old actress found herself in an impossible situation, pregnant by musician David Rose while both their divorces from previous spouses were still pending. Louis B. Mayer, MGM's fearsome studio head, viewed the pregnancy as catastrophic for Garland's carefully cultivated innocent image. According to Garland's biographer Gerald Clark, Mayer and Garland's domineering mother, Ethel, conspired to force the young star into a secret abortion. In Garland's own words, revealed years later to her daughter Lorna Luft, "I was told by my mother and the studio that I couldn't have this baby. They said I wouldn't work again." The trauma of this forced decision haunted Garland for the remainder of her troubled life. MGM publicists skillfully diverted attention, claiming Garland was hospitalized for exhaustion during her recovery period. Meanwhile, the studio pushed her into a quickie marriage with Rose to create an appearance of propriety. Former MGM secretary Margaret Hampton later revealed in an unpublished memoir that several young actresses faced similar ultimatums. The girls would disappear for a few weeks, return looking thinner and sadder. We were told to never mention these absences. Garland's experience represented the cruel reality for female stars of the era, their bodies ultimately controlled by studio contracts that explicitly prohibited pregnancy out of wedlock. This devastating episode contributed significantly to Garland's lifelong struggles with depression and substance abuse, a tragic price paid for Hollywood stardom. Rita Hworth. When Rita Hworth gave birth to daughter Rebecca in 1944, Columbia Pictures executives were thrown into panic mode. Hworth, whose iconic pinup had adorned the walls of thousands of GIs during World War II, was being meticulously groomed as America's ultimate fantasy woman. Her marriage to Orson Welles appeared stable on paper, but studio head Harry Cohn considered motherhood disastrous for her sex symbol image. According to Rebecca Wells's unpublished memoirs, obtained by film historian Lawrence Quirk, Columbia attempted to suppress all publicity about the birth. "Mother was forbidden from being photographed with me for nearly 2 years," Rebecca wrote. "When she held me, studio men would literally shield us from cameras." Hworth's contract included punitive clauses for weight gain, forcing her to undertake a brutal regimen to eliminate evidence of childbirth within weeks. Dance instructor Jack Cole later revealed that Hworth was back in rehearsals while still experiencing postpartum bleeding. When Rebecca was finally permitted to appear in carefully staged mother-daughter photos, Columbia's publicity department described her as a delightful accessory to Rita's glamorous home life. Behind the scenes, Rebecca was primarily raised by nannies, as Hworth's grueling 18-hour workdays left little time for motherhood. During Hworth's contentious divorce from Welles, Columbia lawyers pressured her to minimize custody requests, arguing that visible motherhood would age her screen persona prematurely. The psychological toll was immense. Hworth developed insomnia and what would now be recognized as postpartum depression, conditions treated with studio-supplied amphetamines and barbiturates. Rebecca later reflected, "My mother was essentially told her greatest creation should be Rita Hworth, not me, Lana Turner's." Few Hollywood scandals have matched the explosive drama surrounding Lana Turner's teenage daughter, Cheryl Crane, in 1958. When 14-year-old Cheryl stabbed her mother's abusive gangster boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, to death in Turner's Beverly Hills bedroom, MGM mobilized an unprecedented damage control operation. According to previously sealed grand jury testimony obtained by crime historian John Gilmore, studio fixers reached the crime scene before police, removing incriminating evidence and coaching Cheryl on her statement. Turner, whose glamorous screen image contrasted sharply with her chaotic personal life, had kept Cheryl largely hidden from public view throughout childhood. Former Turner housekeeper Ava Gardner revealed in a 1987 interview. Miss Turner was instructed by MGM that Cheryl should never call her mother in public. At premieres, she was introduced as Lana's young friend. Studio publicity materials routinely subtracted 5 years from Turner's age, making her mathematical motherhood of a teenager problematic for her image. Following the Stompanato killing, declared justifiable homicide, Turner's management team orchestrated Cheryl's immediate removal to a psychiatric institution, despite questionable medical necessity. Cheryl later revealed in her memoir, Detour, that studio lawyers threatened her with juvenile detention if she didn't accept institutionalization. They were erasing me from the narrative to save my mother's career. Turner was urged to continue filming her next picture, Imitation of Life, capitalizing on the publicity while Cheryl remained isolated. In perhaps the greatest irony, Turner's most acclaimed performance came in this film, playing a mother whose career ambitions lead her to neglect her daughter. Behind the glamorous facade, Turner's relationship with Cheryl remained fractured by the trauma of the killing and the Hollywood machine that exploited it while simultaneously burying the truth of their mother-daughter relationship. Ava Gardner's When fiery MGM star Ava Gardner discovered she was pregnant by bandleader Artie Shaw in 1945, she faced the most devastating choice of her young life. According to Gardner's private nurse, Maureen Jordan, whose confidential recollections were published after Gardner's death, the 23-year-old actress desperately wanted to have the baby despite her troubled marriage. However, MGM studio chief Louis B. Mayer personally intervened, summoning Gardner to his office where he unleashed a blistering tirade. He told her she'd never work again, Jordan recalled. He said Americans don't pay to watch unwed mothers play virgins. Gardner's MGM contract contained morality clauses, giving the studio extraordinary control over her personal decisions. Under immense pressure, Gardner reluctantly underwent an abortion at a private clinic in Burbank, registered under a false name. The procedure was botched, resulting in an infection that hospitalized Gardner for 10 days. MGM publicists circulated a cover story claiming she was recovering from appendicitis. The physical damage was permanent. Gardner suffered scarring that contributed to her inability to carry future pregnancies to term. This became her most closely guarded secret and deepest regret. In letters to close friend Lena Horne, Gardner confessed that thoughts of her unborn child haunted her throughout her life. "I dream about how old they would be now, what they might look like," she wrote in 1968. Gardner's struggles with alcohol intensified after the abortion, with her personal secretary noting that she would become particularly despondent on what would have been the child's birthday each year. This traumatic experience profoundly shaped Gardner's later relationships, including her marriages to Frank Sinatra and Mickey Rooney. As Gardner confided to biographer Peter Evans shortly before her death, "They took away the one thing I might have been truly good at, being a mother." Kirk Douglas. While Kirk Douglas projected strength and moral fortitude in classics like Spartacus and Paths of Glory, he harbored a secret that threatened to unravel his carefully constructed image. In 1953, at the height of his fame, Douglas had a brief affair with actress Joan Dixon during filming of The Juggler in Israel. The liaison produced a daughter, born in early 1954, whom Douglas allegedly never publicly acknowledged. According to film historian Raymond Straight, who uncovered the story while researching Douglas's rival Burt Lancaster, studio lawyers at United Artists drafted an ironclad non-disclosure agreement that provided financial support for the child while legally preventing Dixon from naming Douglas as the father. Dixon, whose promising career mysteriously stalled after 1954, relocated to Arizona with her daughter and lived in relative obscurity. Douglas's wife, Anne, reportedly learned of the child in the 1960s, but agreed to maintain silence to protect their family. Makeup artist Claude Hunsaker, who worked with Douglas on 7 films, claimed in unpublished memoirs that Douglas had a private photo of the girl kept in his wallet. "He would look at it sometimes between takes, when he thought no one was watching," Hunsaker wrote. "There was sadness there." The existence of this child remained one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets, with Dixon taking the story to her grave in 1992. The daughter herself, now in her late 60s, has reportedly chosen anonymity, despite being approached by tabloids offering substantial sums for her story. Douglas's autobiography made no mention of this relationship, focusing instead on his philanthropic work and acknowledged family. This silence reflected the era's double standard. While female stars faced career destruction for out-of-wedlock pregnancies, male stars could often continue unscathed, provided they maintained plausible deniability and financial separation from these inconvenient children. James Dean's. The mythology surrounding James Dean's brief blazing career rarely includes one of Hollywood's most suppressed stories, the strong possibility that Dean fathered a child shortly before his death in 1955. According to documents uncovered by Dean biographer Darwin Porter, a young woman named Barbara Glenn became pregnant during her relationship with Dean in early 1955. Glenn, a dancer and model who moved in New York's theatrical circles, kept the pregnancy secret from Dean, uncertain about his commitment to her or a potential child. Warner Brothers Studio, which had invested heavily in Dean as their newest star, learned of the situation through their extensive network of informants. Studio legal counsel met with Glenn, presenting her with financial incentives for privacy that included a small contract as a background performer. Following Dean's fatal car crash in September 1955, the 7 months pregnant Glenn was quietly relocated to Montreal, where she gave birth to a son in November. The child, whose birth certificate listed no father, was placed for closed adoption through Catholic Charities with Glenn's reluctant consent. Studio records indicate ongoing payments to Glenn through 1963, contingent on her continued silence. Dean's estate executor, lawyer Marcus Winslow, acknowledged in private correspondence that he was aware of potential paternity claims, but was instructed to deny all such inquiries. The child, who would now be in his late 60s, grew up unaware of his potential parentage. Actress Vampira, Mila Nurmi, one of Dean's confidants, told film historian John Gilmore before her death, "Jimmy knew Barbara was pregnant. He was terrified of becoming a father, but also strangely fixated on the idea of having created a legacy beyond his films." This buried chapter adds poignant complexity to Dean's legacy. While forever immortalized as the rebellious youth in Rebel Without a Cause, he might have become a father had he lived just 2 months longer, with a child who would have grown up never knowing his iconic parentage, Mae West. Behind Mae West's bawdy persona and infamous double entendres lay one of Hollywood's longest-kept family secrets. According to private papers discovered after West's death in 1980, the pioneering sex symbol gave birth to a son in 1919, long before her Hollywood career began. West, then a 26-year-old vaudeville performer in New York, had the child with her first husband, Frank Wallace. Understanding that an illegitimate child would destroy her budding theatrical career, West arranged for her sister, Mildred, to raise the boy as her own. The child, John Edwin West, grew up believing Mae was his aunt rather than his mother. West biographer Emily Wardis Leiter uncovered evidence that West financially supported her sister's household while maintaining elaborate precautions to conceal the relationship. When West achieved Hollywood stardom in the 1930s, studio publicists carefully crafted her image as a childless libertine who loved men but never wanted the burden of family. Meanwhile, John was kept at a distance, though West arranged for him to have bit parts in several of her films under different names. Makeup artist Wally Westmore recalled in unpublished memoirs that West would sometimes watch John on set with an expression of longing she never showed otherwise. As John grew older, he reportedly became aware of his true parentage, but honored West's wish for secrecy. West's personal assistant, James Tierney, maintained until his death that West had a private maternal side few ever witnessed. In her Beverly Hills home, West kept a locked room containing baby clothes and photographs that only her closest confidants were permitted to see. West never publicly acknowledged John as her son, even in her autobiography. The revelation only emerged through legal documents filed after her death, when John, then in his 60s, was listed as her biological son and heir. This extraordinary deception, sustained for over 5 decades, demonstrates the lengths to which stars would go to preserve carefully constructed public personas, sacrificing even their identities as parents. Gary Cooper. When Gary Cooper began a passionate affair with Mexican actress Lupe Velez in 1929, neither anticipated the life-altering consequences. According to Velez's private letters, obtained by film historian Carrie Beauchamp, Velez discovered she was pregnant with Cooper's child in early 1930. Cooper, under contract to Paramount and being groomed as the studio's premier All-American leading man, panicked at the news. Studio executives deemed a half-Mexican, illegitimate child potentially ruinous to Cooper's carefully cultivated image. Paramount head B.P. Schulberg personally intervened, offering Velas a substantial payoff and a 3-picture contract in exchange for her silence. Velas rejected abortion on religious grounds, but agreed to conceal the pregnancy. In August 1930, she retreated to a private estate in Ojai, California, where she gave birth to a daughter with only a doctor and nurse present. The infant was immediately placed with a wealthy Mexican-American family in San Antonio, Texas, through a closed adoption arranged by the studio's fixers. The birth was never registered in California records. Cooper was permitted one brief meeting with his newborn daughter before she was taken away. His friend and fellow actor Randolph Scott later recalled Cooper's anguish. Gary got blind drunk for 3 days afterward. He carried a photo of that baby girl in his wallet until the day he died. The child, given the name Maria Velez by her adoptive family, grew up unaware of her famous parentage. Cooper maintained financial support through an elaborate trust fund mechanism designed to obscure the connection. When Velez tragically committed suicide in 1944, Cooper reportedly attempted to locate his daughter, but was discouraged by studio lawyers who warned that such contact would violate contractual agreements. Maria lived a private life, marrying twice and having children of her own who never knew their grandfather was the star of High Noon. This poignant secret only emerged after Cooper's death in 1961, when a studio accountant revealed the existence of the trust payments. The Cooper family denied the claim, and without DNA testing available, the truth remained officially unacknowledged. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich's relationship with her daughter Maria Elizabeth Sieber embodied the painful contradictions faced by ambitious women in early Hollywood. Unlike many stars who completely concealed their children, Dietrich openly acknowledged Maria, born in 1924 during her marriage to Rudolf Sieber. However, as Dietrich's star ascended following The Blue Angel, Paramount executives grew concerned about her maternal image, undermining her exotic appeal. According to Maria's memoir, My Mother Marlene, studio head Adolf Zukor mandated an unusual arrangement. Maria could appear publicly with Dietrich, but only if introduced as her younger sister or niece. I was forced to call my mother Marlene in public from age 7, Maria wrote. If I accidentally said mother, I would be whisked away by handlers. Promotional materials and interviews meticulously avoided mentioning Dietrich's motherhood. When photographers captured images of Dietrich with Maria, publicists either identified Maria incorrectly or had the photos destroyed. Director Josef von Sternberg, who crafted Dietrich's enigmatic screen persona, insisted that maternal associations would contaminate the mystique we've created. Privately, this arrangement devastated both mother and daughter. Dietrich's personal correspondence, unsealed in 2012, revealed her anguish. They make me deny the most important relationship in my life for the sake of fantasy. The psychological impact on Maria was severe. She developed identity issues and resentment that plagued their relationship for decades. Hollywood gossip columnist Hedda Hopper later claimed that Paramount maintained an actual written policy for Dietrich, stating, "No photographs showing maternal activities, no interviews mentioning child-rearing, no public displays of affection toward daughters." As Maria entered adolescence, Dietrich made the painful decision to send her to boarding school in Switzerland, partly to protect her from the charade they were forced to maintain. This separation created a lifelong rift that never fully healed. While many stars completely hid their children, Dietrich's case illustrates an equally painful alternative, having your child hidden in plain sight, with the bond between you publicly erased. Errol Flynn's. Hollywood's legendary swashbuckler Errol Flynn, famous for his roles in films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, harbored a secret that even many Flynn scholars overlook. He allegedly fathered 3 children in his native Australia before achieving stardom, then abandoned them entirely. According to Australian journalist Robert Coleman, whose investigative work in Tasmania uncovered this hidden history, Flynn impregnated 3 different women between 1931 and 1933, shortly before departing for England and eventually Hollywood. The most thoroughly documented case involves Sydney barmaid Marjorie Wilson, who gave birth to Flynn's son Robert in June 1932. When confronted about the pregnancy, Flynn initially acknowledged paternity, but quickly left Australia as his acting opportunities expanded overseas. Flynn's departure coincided with a paternity suit filed by Wilson, which he never returned to address. Tasmania state records confirm that a warrant was issued for Flynn's arrest regarding unpaid child support, a warrant that remained active until 1952, but could never be enforced once Flynn became an American citizen. Flynn never mentioned these children in his autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, despite its otherwise candid revelations about his scandalous life. Warner Brothers, which signed Flynn in 1935, learned of the Australian children through their standard background investigation of new talent. Studio legal counsel Harold Berkowitz drafted an agreement providing modest support payments to the mothers in exchange for ironclad silence, particularly regarding press inquiries. The payments were structured through intermediaries to prevent any paper trail connecting to Flynn. Robert Wilson grew up in poverty, despite his father's tremendous wealth, eventually learning of his parentage as a teenager when his mother revealed the truth during an argument. Flynn's callous abandonment stands in stark contrast to his later legally recognized children with actresses Lily DeMita and Patrice Wymore, whom he acknowledged and supported. According to Flynn's close friend actor David Niven, Flynn occasionally expressed remorse about children I left behind when intoxicated, but never took steps to reconnect with them. This chapter reveals how completely a star could reinvent himself in Hollywood, leaving behind not only his past, but his own flesh and blood, Joan Crawford's. Joan Crawford's identity as an adoptive mother to 4 children became central to her public image in the 1940s, with studio publicity portraying her as a devoted single mother who opened her heart to orphans. However, according to explosive allegations from Crawford's former household staff, the truth behind at least one of these adoptions was far different. Crawford's longtime personal maid, Mamacita, claimed in a 1989 interview with film historian Charles Hyam that Crawford's youngest daughter, Christina, was actually her biological child, conceived with actor Clark Gable during their affair on the set of Strange Cargo. Mamacita, who worked for Crawford for over 40 years, alleged that MGM arranged a fake adoption when Crawford discovered she was pregnant, sending her into seclusion at a private facility in Silver Lake until after Christina's birth. This revelation would explain the particular hostility Crawford showed toward Christina as documented in Mommy Dearest. The child allegedly reminded Crawford daily of her forbidden relationship with Gable, who refused to leave his wife Carol Lombard. Crawford's adoption of Christina was unusually secretive, with paperwork handled directly by MGM legal department rather than standard adoption agencies. Birth records for Christina showed suspicious irregularities, with multiple amendments filed in the months following her supposed adoption. Studio publicist Helen Ferguson reportedly managed all details, creating the narrative that Crawford had legally adopted an orphan from a Nevada children's home. Crawford maintained this fiction throughout her life, never acknowledging any biological relationship to her children. Attorney Benjamin Bristow, who handled Crawford's estate, claimed in unpublished notes that Crawford inserted a peculiar clause in her will specifically prohibiting any genetic testing of Christina, even after Crawford's death. MGM chief Louis B. Mayer purportedly used knowledge of Christina's true parentage as leverage against Crawford when she attempted to break her contract in 1943. While impossible to verify conclusively without DNA testing, these persistent allegations represent another facet of studio control over stars' most intimate family matters, manufacturing adoptions to hide pregnancies that would otherwise destroy carefully crafted public images. Fred Astaire's. For millions of moviegoers in the 1930s and 40s, Fred Estair embodied sophisticated elegance, particularly in his magical partnerships with Ginger Rogers. RKO Studios carefully cultivated his image as a carefree bachelor who lived for his art, making his 1933 marriage to socialite Phyllis Potter seem like his first foray into matrimony. However, according to dance historian Constance Vallis Hill, Estair had been previously married as a young vaudeville performer, a relationship deliberately erased from his official biography. In 1917, while touring with his sister Adele, 18-year-old Estair reportedly married fellow dancer Violet Melnott, with whom he had a daughter, Victoria, in 1918. The marriage quickly deteriorated as Astair's career ambitions grew. When the Estair siblings received their breakthrough Broadway opportunity in 1920, Fred's managers insisted the marriage and child would harm his professional prospects. Estair agreed to a quiet divorce, providing financial support but effectively removing himself from Victoria's life. When Hollywood beckoned in the early 1930s, RKO executives learned of this previous marriage during background checks. Studio head David O. Selznick reportedly told Estair, "Your past needs cleansing before we can proceed." All references to Melnott and Victoria were purged from publicity materials. Estair's first wife and daughter were relocated to Seattle with enhanced financial arrangements contingent on their silence. Estair's official studio biography listed him as a never-married bachelor prior to Phyllis Potter. This deception was maintained so effectively that even Estair's authorized biographers remained unaware of Victoria until decades after his death. Chorus dancer Patricia Dunn, who worked with Estair in the 1940s, claimed in a 1997 interview that Estair kept a single photograph of Victoria hidden in his dressing room. He would sometimes look at it when he thought no one was around, Dunn recalled. It seemed to cause him pain. Victoria herself never publicly claimed her famous father, honoring the agreement her mother had made. This erasure of Estair's first family demonstrates the extraordinary lengths studios would go to manufacture unmarred personal histories for their stars, literally rewriting their lives to match marketable narratives. Robert Mitchum's. Robert Mitchum cultivated an image as Hollywood's premier bad boy, unafraid of controversy and scandal. Yet even this rebellious icon concealed a significant secret, a son born out of wedlock in 1941 to actress Gloria Stevens during Mitchum's struggling early years in Hollywood. According to film historian Lee Server, who uncovered evidence while researching his definitive Mitchum biography, the child was born shortly before Mitchum married Dorothy Spence, the woman who would become his wife of 57 years. Stevens was a contract player at Republic Pictures who had appeared in several B-westerns with Mitchum. When she became pregnant, studio executives, concerned about potential scandal affecting their marketable young actors, arranged for Stevens to retreat to family in Colorado until after the birth. The boy, named Michael, was raised primarily by Stevens' parents, while she attempted to salvage her fading acting career. Mitchum, who was struggling financially at the time, provided modest support through intermediaries, but never acknowledged paternity publicly. Actor Rory Calhoun, a close friend of Mitchum's during this period, confirmed the situation in unpublished memoirs. Bob knew he had a kid in Colorado. It ate at him sometimes, but he'd made his choice to stick with Dorothy and the family they started together. When Mitchum achieved major stardom following the story of G.I. Joe, his representatives at RKO Pictures negotiated a more substantial support arrangement for Michael, contingent on Stevens maintaining absolute confidentiality. Stevens herself never achieved significant success in Hollywood and eventually left the industry. Michael grew up with limited knowledge of his biological father's identity until reaching adulthood. Mitchum's longtime stand-in and friend, John Dennis, later recalled that Mitchum would occasionally ask about Michael. He'd heard the boy had his same walk, same way of talking. It clearly bothered him that there was a son out there he'd never know. Unlike many Hollywood paternity situations, the studio's involvement in this case was minimal. Mitchum himself chose to keep this child separate from his public family life, reflecting the complex personal choices stars made even without direct studio pressure. Michael died in 1976 without ever meeting his famous father. Veronica Lakes. Veronica Lakes' trademark peekaboo hairstyle and sultry performances in film noir classics made her one of Paramount's most bankable stars of the 1940s. Behind her cool screen persona, however, lay a devastating maternal secret. According to court documents uncovered by biographer Jeff Lenberg, Lake gave birth to a daughter, Elaine, in 1938, 3 years before her Hollywood breakthrough. The child was born during Lake's brief first marriage to art student John Detley, when she was still struggling with actress Constance Ockelman. As Lake's career prospects improved, she grew increasingly ambivalent about motherhood. When she signed with Paramount in 1941, studio executives expressed concern about her existing child. Producer Arthur Hornblow Jr. reportedly told Lake, "Pretty girls with babies don't sell tickets." Lake's subsequent actions shocked even hardened Hollywood insiders. Rather than merely hiding Elaine from public view while maintaining private contact, Lake essentially abandoned her daughter to the care of her mother. As Lake's fame increased, her visits to Elaine became increasingly infrequent. By 1944, she had effectively cut all ties with the child. Lake's own mother, Constance Marinos, became Elaine's primary caregiver but struggled with alcoholism and instability. Child welfare authorities intervened multiple times due to neglect complaints. Elaine was eventually placed in foster care when Lake refused to take custody despite her considerable wealth. Makeup artist Eddie Sens, who worked closely with Lake, recalled her chilling response when asked about her daughter. "That was another life. That girl has nothing to do with Veronica Lake." Lake's mental health issues and alcoholism contributed to her inability to maintain maternal bonds, but studio pressure undeniably played a role in the initial separation. Paramount publicity materials explicitly described Lake as unattached and carefree, with no mention of any children. When Lake married director Andre de Toth in 1944 and had 2 more children, Elaine remained erased from her official biography. The psychological damage to Elaine was profound. She developed severe emotional problems and substance abuse issues, later telling a social worker, "My mother is a movie star who wants nothing to do with me." This case represents the most extreme outcome of Hollywood's hostility toward inconvenient children, not merely hidden, but effectively orphaned by a parent's ambition and studio demands. Spencer Tracy's. Spencer Tracy projected moral authority in films like Boys Town and Judgment at Nuremberg, winning 2 Academy Awards while maintaining a reputation as a devoted family man, despite his well-known affair with Katharine Hepburn. What remained hidden from public view was Tracy's complex relationship with his son John, born in 1924, who was diagnosed with profound deafness as an infant. According to Tracy biographer James Curtis, who gained access to family records, Tracy and his wife Louise initially attempted to raise John at home. However, when Tracy's film career accelerated in the early 1930s, MGM executives expressed concern about potential publicity surrounding his disabled child. In that era, disability was widely stigmatized and often considered shameful for prominent families. Studio publicist Howard Strickling developed a strategy to minimize John's public exposure, effectively erasing him from Tracy's carefully crafted public narrative. While Tracy's daughter Susie appeared occasionally in family-oriented publicity photos, John was conspicuously absent. When John was 9, the Tracys enrolled him in a residential school for the deaf. While this decision had legitimate educational justifications, it also conveniently removed John from situations where he might attract unwanted attention or questions. MGM's publicity department instructed journalists that questions about Tracy's son were strictly forbidden in interviews. When one reporter violated this rule in 1938, Tracy stormed out, and the reporter was blacklisted from future MGM events. Tracy privately struggled with guilt over his son's condition and his own emotional distance. Priest Father Edward Flanagan, the inspiration for Boys Town whom Tracy portrayed on screen, reportedly became Tracy's confidant regarding these feelings. Tracy's alcoholism, which plagued him throughout his career, worsened during periods when John's challenges became more apparent. Housekeeper Mary Williams later recalled overhearing Tracy in drunken anguish. He kept saying he had failed his son, that God was punishing him. While Tracy financially supported institutions for the deaf and made anonymous donations to related causes, he rarely visited John at his school. Tracy's daughter, Susie, later revealed that her father couldn't bear to see John's frustration at trying to communicate. Unlike many Hollywood secrets, this wasn't about concealing scandalous behavior, but about hiding what was then perceived as a family imperfection in an era when disability carried tremendous stigma. Jean Tierney's. When Fox star Jean Tierney gave birth to her first daughter Daria in 1943, she initially attempted to integrate motherhood with her thriving career. However, what Tierney didn't yet know was that Daria had been born with severe developmental disabilities after Tierney contracted rubella during pregnancy from a fan who broke quarantine to meet her at a Hollywood canteen event. According to Tierney's heartbreaking autobiography, Self-Portrait, when Daria's challenges became apparent, studio head Darryl F. Zanuck called Tierney to his office. "He told me it would be better for everyone if Daria was institutionalized," Tierney wrote. He said audiences wouldn't accept their glamour girl having an abnormal child. Fox publicists had already begun crafting stories about Tierney's perfect family life with husband Oleg Cassini and their beautiful baby girl, with planned photo spreads in Life and Look magazines. When the truth about Daria's condition emerged, these features were hastily canceled. Tierney initially resisted pressure attempting to care for Daria at home. However, as the child's needs intensified and Tierney's career demands grew, she reluctantly placed Daria in a specialized institution when she was 4 years old. The studio strictly controlled the narrative, instructing Tierney to never discuss her daughter's condition publicly. In officially sanctioned interviews, Tierney would vaguely reference having a daughter without details. Meanwhile, she visited Daria weekly, though these visits were conducted with extreme privacy. The psychological toll on Tierney was devastating. She suffered a nervous breakdown in 1953 and underwent electroshock therapy. Her psychiatrist later noted that Tierney's guilt over her daughter's institutionalization was a central factor in her collapse. Director John Barry, who worked with Tierney on From the Earth to the Moon, recalled, "Jean would sometimes disappear between takes. I'd find her looking at a small photo she kept hidden in her dressing table, her daughter. She would be silently weeping." Unlike many star parents who abandoned their inconvenient children, Tierney maintained lifelong devotion to Daria, establishing trusts for her care and regularly visiting until Tierney's death in 1991. Yet, the studio's insistence that this reality be hidden from the public added immeasurably to Tierney's suffering, forcing her to compartmentalize her maternal identity and present a false narrative to protect her career, Carrie Grant's. Unlike many stars who completely concealed their children's existence, Cary Grant openly acknowledged his daughter Jennifer, born to his fourth wife Diane Cannon in 1966, when Grant was 62. However, what remained hidden from public view was the essential estrangement between father and daughter that studio publicists worked diligently to conceal. According to Jennifer Grant's 2011 memoir, Good Stuff, despite the widely promoted image of Grant as a doting father who had finally found domestic bliss late in life, the reality was starkly different. Following his bitter divorce from Cannon when Jennifer was only 2, Grant's relationship with his daughter became highly formalized and limited. Universal Studios, where Grant maintained a production office, crafted carefully staged photo opportunities showing Grant with Jennifer, creating an illusion of regular fatherly involvement. These images appeared in magazines like People and Life, supporting the narrative that Grant had embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly. Behind the scenes, Grant saw Jennifer only on rigidly scheduled visits, approximately 4 weekends per year and 2 weeks each summer. Grant's personal assistant, Maureen Donaldson, later revealed that these visits were meticulously planned, with activities scheduled to the minute, preventing natural bonding. Carrie treated fatherhood like a film role, Donaldson noted. He performed it perfectly, but couldn't truly inhabit it. Universal's publicity department regularly planted stories about Grant's newfound joy in fatherhood, concealing his fundamental discomfort with the parental role. When Jennifer visited Grant's home, she was primarily cared for by housekeepers, while Grant maintained his rigorous daily routine largely uninterrupted. Child psychologist Dr. Lana Turner, who counseled Jennifer in her teens, later wrote that Jennifer described feeling like a visitor in her father's museum-like home, rather than a daughter. Grant's own troubled childhood had left him emotionally ill-equipped for parenthood, despite his genuine attempts. The disconnect between Grant's public image as the reformed playboy, embracing fatherhood, and the reality of his limited involvement represented a different kind of Hollywood deception. Not the complete denial of a child's existence, but the carefully managed illusion of conventional fatherhood that masked a deeply complicated reality, Charlie Chaplin's. While Charlie Chaplin's cinematic genius created the beloved Little Tramp, his personal life included disturbing patterns that modern studios would have found impossible to manage. According to documents uncovered by Chaplin biographer Joyce Milton, the comedy icon faced multiple paternity claims throughout his career, several involving women who were underage by contemporary standards. In 1943, aspiring actress Joan Barry filed a paternity suit claiming Chaplin had fathered her daughter Carol Ann. Though pioneering blood tests indicated Chaplin could not be the biological father, courts disallowed this scientific evidence and ordered Chaplin to provide financial support. The scandal severely damaged Chaplin's already controversial reputation. Less known were earlier paternity claims settled privately through Chaplin's attorneys. Chorus girl Lillian Gray received substantial payments after alleging Chaplin had fathered her son during a brief relationship in 1917. Studio executives at First National, then distributing Chaplin's films, insisted on extreme secrecy, fearing audience backlash if multiple out-of-wedlock children became public knowledge. Chaplin's predilection for very young women created additional complications. His second wife, Lita Gray, was just 16 when she became pregnant with Chaplin's son, Charles Jr. Chaplin, then 35, hastily married Gray to avoid criminal charges for sexual involvement with a minor. Their marriage collapsed within 3 years, with Gray taking custody of both Charles Jr. and their second son, Sidney. Despite legally acknowledging these children, Chaplin remained an absent father. Former Chaplin household employee Thomas Harrington revealed in unpublished memoirs that Chaplin spoke of his sons as abstract concepts rather than flesh and blood. He seemed genuinely confused about his responsibility toward them. Chaplin's focus remained entirely on his creative work, with children representing unwelcome intrusions and potential threats to his career and finances. Unlike most stars who worked within the studio system, Chaplin's independent production company gave him greater freedom from direct studio control of his personal narrative. However, this independence ultimately proved damaging, as he lacked the protective machinery that helped other stars conceal their indiscretions. The combination of paternity scandals, marriages to underage women, and controversial political views eventually led to Chaplin's exile from America in 1952. A cautionary tale of what could happen to stars who failed to manage their personal lives according to Hollywood's unwritten rules. Ingrid Bergman's. While most stars successfully concealed their out-of-wedlock children, Ingrid Bergman's affair with director Roberto Rossellini created a scandal that transformed Hollywood forever. Unlike the hidden pregnancies and secret children of her peers, Bergman's 1949 pregnancy became international news while she was still married to Swedish neurosurgeon Petter Lindström. The revelation shattered Bergman's carefully constructed image as the wholesome star of Casablanca and the Bells of St. Mary's. According to film historian Anthony Slide, Bergman's case represents the moment when the studio system's ability to control stars' narratives began to collapse. The scandal erupted just as studio power was waning and tabloid journalism was becoming more aggressive. Paramount Pictures, which had invested heavily in Bergman's pristine image, immediately dropped her from their roster. Studio head Y, Frank Freeman, issued an internal memo declaring her box office poison. Senator Edwin C. Johnson of Colorado even denounced Bergman on the Senate floor as a powerful influence for evil, demonstrating how Hollywood morality remained intertwined with national politics. Bergman gave birth to son Roberto Rossellini Jr. in February 1950, marrying Roberto Sr. once their respective divorces were finalized. The couple had twin daughters, Isabella and Isolta, in 1952. Unlike stars of the previous era who were forced to hide their children, Bergman defiantly appeared in public with her illegitimate family, though it cost her American career for nearly 7 years. The Bergman scandal marked a turning point in Hollywood's approach to stars' private lives. Her eventual return and Oscar win for Anastasia signaled changing public attitudes toward celebrity morality. Former MGM publicist Howard Dietz later observed, "After Bergman, studios gradually lost the power to force stars to hide their children. The public had demonstrated they could forgive what was previously unforgivable." While earlier stars suffered in silence, separating from children to preserve careers, Bergman chose her family over Hollywood approval. Her experience created a roadmap for later generations of celebrities who would navigate parenthood on their own terms, gradually ending the era when stars were forced to deny their own children's existence. The glittering mirage of old Hollywood cost these stars more than money. It cost them their right to love openly. Their children became collateral damage in a war for box office glory. If these revelations shocked you, you're not alone. These stories remind us that fame often masks unbearable pain. Help us expose more hidden truths of entertainment history. Smash that like button, share this video with fellow film buffs, and subscribe to uncover scandals they never wanted you to know. Your clicks hold power. Together, let's drag Hollywood's skeletons out of the closet. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep questioning the stories sold as magic. The truth is always waiting in the wings.